Greetings, fanboys and fangirls. Jared here with another video review from Fanboys Forever. Today we're going to be having a look at the brand new Mattel Creations exclusive Masterverse Vykron figure from the Masters of the Universe. But of course, before we start, if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, this is a great time to do so. There's just constant Masters releases, and I'm currently going through a whole new batch of Masters products to get these brand new reviews out there. So if that's something you're interested in, please go ahead and give us a subscribe. Not only that, but if you're interested, be sure to like the video because it really does help us out. With all that out of the way, let's begin. Let's talk about Vykron as a character. Of course, Vykron is kind of a representation or amalgamation of the three different prototypes that Roger Sweet came up with for the Masters of the Universe line. These were kind of kit bashed together figures using spare parts and things and custom painted. You had the Spaceman concept for He-Man if it was to be a sci-fi property. You have the familiar Barbarian concept that was more like Conan. And then you have the Military Man concept where He-Man would be more like a walking tank. As you can see, all three of these looks will be represented here, and this is sort of in a way a remake of the Four Horsemen's attempt at this same idea, where they kind of conglomerated those three things and called him Vykron in the Masters of the Universe Classics line. And of course, we'll be comparing those. And on the back, we have a fantastic shot of Vykron in his three forms. Of course, here, Vykron is interpreted as a gladiator in ancient Eternia. And in the original Masters of the Universe Classics lore, it said that he just had these kind of outrageous outfits that he would wear to entertain the crowd a little bit more until he was horribly and brutally murdered by Gygor, the gorilla. I always thought that was kind of stupid, to be honest with you. However, they have remedied that slightly on the website. It gives you a little more detail about Vykron, and it says that as he defeated his opponents, he would take their armor and he would master each of the different weapon styles to make himself more effective in the arena. So I actually think that's a huge improvement, and this artwork is, wow, this is chef's kiss. Fantastic. If you fold the box out, you can actually see that it's kind of one big image right here, and it is truly gorgeous and pretty much suitable for framing, in my opinion. At the top, you can see that this is considered to be a part of the new Eternia subline. Once you open the box, you even get a little insert, and this is of course of the Barbarian version of Vykron, which I suppose is like the main version, and it's kind of like spotlight artwork. If you turn it around, you can see that we have this absolutely gorgeous backing piece if you want to use that for your backdrop. On the inside, we have Vykron here chained to the inside, and it looks like that he is just rip-roaring ready to go. And at the bottom, since this is a plasticless packaging, you can see that we do have a little box, and it tells you the contents. I actually like this contents guide because I do feel like there's always problems with sometimes you're missing accessories in these boxes. He is Vykron, the ultimate Eternian champion. Not only do we have the figure, but like I said, on the inside you have all of the accessories kind of just scattered around. I appreciate that it's not in a baggie because I always think that's stupid when you have all kinds of paper to go through. So yeah, let's go ahead and get him out of the box. So here we have Vykron in his Barbarian form or Conan light form, whatever you want to say. And I think he looks terrific this way. Of course, here's a picture of what the original Roger Sweet prototype looked like when they were kind of just trying to figure out exactly what He-Man would be. The influence is just obvious. Of course, the Masters of the Universe Classics figure, which we'll look at a little bit later, kind of already established the template for how to take a regular Masters of the Universe He-Man buck body and pretty much add on these extra parts for how to do it. And of course, later on, we're going to be looking at some very close-up comparisons with those two. So I was trying to figure out exactly how I'd review this because it truly is kind of a unique item when it comes to Masters stuff. And the best way I think that we can do it, the most efficient way, is just to look at each individual mode. Keep in mind, this is all the same buck body. It's not a 3-pack of figures. You're just getting accessories to switch him into different modes. So looking at the Barbarian mode, I think this would probably be the best time to much more closely look at articulation. Of course, with articulation, I don't think there's any surprises here. I think, you know, obviously it works like most of the other Masterverse figures. There's some great hinges and there's double joints. I do think the diaphragm joint has been improved compared to what I've seen in the past, because you can do some really crazy stuff. Works really well. There's nothing really limiting the head, and the hair is high up enough to where you can get lots of great range. You can go side to side on that, and then the waist swivels. He can do the splits really well. Just looking at the loincloth, thankfully they keep using this really soft material and it no longer inhibits him whatsoever. You can see there's even cuts at the thighs and double joints right here. There's even a cut at the boots right there, and there's some fantastic ankles that not only hinge very deeply, but they can really pivot so that you can get those really wide poses. And with just a little bit of effort, you can definitely have him hold those poses no problem. There's so much to talk about. I suppose the easiest spot to begin with is this head sculpt. And I have to say, wow, this is such an expressive kind of barbarian head. This is probably the best Conan head sculpt I've seen, like Marvel Comics kind of Conan, that I've ever seen. This is really great. And I love the expression that they have on his face. This truly does look like, you know, a classic kind of barbarian Conan-esque type of thing. I love how the hair looks like it's being smushed by the helmet on the sides. And the eyes have a lot of life in them, even more so than what we're used to seeing in this line. I think that and just the expression is perfect. He looks like he's concentrating, like he's trying to get ready for his next foe. And the helmet with the kind of silver speckling right there, and the big red gem and the pointy thing at the top. I think it looks great. So this is a huge win in terms of head sculpt. I really like the classic iron cross right here and the kind of silvery blue that it has on the gem. I really like the red gemstone going right here, and I even like, you can kind of see some H's right there. So, you know, I guess he's defending the sword of he or something. I don't know. Either way, it's really cool that these are on here. I also really like all the techie details on the belt. That's a really nice touch. And down here he even has little shin guards that of course match his iron cross up here. Other than that, it is very reminiscent of He-Man's armor. Of course, not only that, but on the back you can see that he has this huge furry cape. And this is a very prominent feature of that original Roger Sweet prototype. I sort of wish it was a little more prominent, but you know what? When I put it up here, you can make it more prominent. It is very similar to the King Grayskull deal, where you have straps right there that hold it on, and that means that you can kind of move it up here if you want to. You can even, as you can see that I'm doing, use the hair to kind of pin it in place. So if you're like me and you want the fur to be more prominent, definitely do that, because I think it gives it more of an identity and keeps it from just looking like a Masters Universe Revelation He-Man body with a new head. I think that that's very unfair to this figure, because it really does turn out great. I also like the tonoplastic they went for with the body, and of course out of all the modes, this is the one where he's the most exposed, where you're going to see more of the actual body sculpt. And here it's the opposite of what they did with the Masters Universe Revelation He-Man, where he looks so orangey and spray tan-esque. Here it's very kind of, it's kind of like a darker, like more shade of skin, but it's also kind of light as well. So it's like this really interesting shade. I really like it. And, you know, I think it's okay that the head is a little darker, like on the face. So I actually think that it all comes together rather nicely. I also really like his axe. It has kind of a corkscrew look and a little opening right there. And these are some great little details that kind of make it its own unique thing. I'm glad they didn't put any paint on the handle, because as we've seen in the past, that can be sort of disastrous. Looking at accessories, aside from the axe, he does come with two-fisted hands. So other than that, this is what you get. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Vykron in his classic Barbarian mode is just spectacular looking. I mean, this is beautiful. What a compelling little deluxe figure that this turned out to be. But of course, as I promised, it is very important to me to show you some comparisons. And of course, that Masters Universe Classics version, which this is pretty well a remake of. Alright, and here we have our very first comparison. There's no script or anything. I'm just going by first impressions and just seeing how I feel about each one. Of course, like I said, it's so important to talk about that this concept is truly something that, you know, the Four Horsemen and the management at Mattel at the time, they came up with this approach for classics. And so we have to give them some conceptual credit about this even being a thing when it comes to Masters of the Universe figures, that this is even the approach. That being said, I do feel that there has been some visual improvement in the several years since the release of this figure, as there should be, because that has been a decade, you know, ago. And so I feel that if there wasn't, that would be crazy. There's been a ridiculous amount of improvement in articulation since this time. There has been improvements in terms of sculpt, and I suppose that's completely subjective. But, you know, to me, when I look at this version of Vykron, he does very much look like He-Man with like a black wig on, you know, and kind of a funny spinning top hat. Whereas this is a little more refined. It's actually a lot more refined. Looking more like Conan, like a separate character that has his own identity, with I think one of the biggest improvements in sculpting being the hair. Because over here I always had an issue with how drab the hair kind of looks, where it's just, it does look very much like a wig almost. And even though that's not the impression that you would want, you would just want it to look more organic. And I think we have a lot more of that here. And of course, at the time, Masters Classics was not the kind of line that had soft goods almost ever for the Mattel portion of that line. And as you can see, the Horsemen did what they could in terms of sculpting this fur cape. But nothing is going to compare to the actual soft goods as an homage to that original figure, because that's just the original execution of the thing. There is a whole lot more going on here that represents, you know, a better looking figure. This one looks a little more lively because of the brighter blues that they used, and I think that the shin guards look a lot better because they actually cover the furry boots. Down here it's very awkward, so I'm definitely going to give the shin guards to this guy. But other than that, I really do feel like the new Masterverse version, that's where it's at visually. And of course articulation, it's going to be a bust on all three for articulation for the classics version, because it's not as advanced a figure, and time has gone by and now we have more modern articulation. And yeah, I think I'm definitely going to give Barbarian Mode to the brand new Masterverse version. So, alright, so this would be a good time to just show you what the figure looks like in, I guess, like bearer mode, where it doesn't have, you know, all the attachments and everything. So first things first, what we want to do is pop the head off when we're transforming it. And you can see that this whole harness is removable. It's a pretty simple process. You just kind of pull this through, and you can pretty much just undo one of the loops. And if you want to, you can remove this fur cape. You can see the Velcro straps right there, just like King Grayskull's and how it worked. The other thing that I think is maybe a little needlessly complicated are these straps that are on the shin guards. I think that there was probably an easier way to execute this. Of course, this is more authentic from the back, but I really just feel like clip-on stuff would have probably worked just as well. This is kind of aggravating to remove. You also want to undo the hands here, which this is something you couldn't do with the Masters Classics version. And the wrist guards actually come off with these bracelets. And of course, with all of the accoutrements removed, you can see what we have left. Just kind of a basic barbarian buck for you to add whatever you want to it. First thing I'm going to do is add the tank armor, because that's the mode I'm going to next. We just put that over the chest, and on the back we slide the belt over these two little pegs, and it can be a little bit of a tight fit, so I think I'm gonna go down the waist a little bit. And after a little bit of a struggle, I finally have it on both. The good news though is, because of all that, this thing is on there tight and it doesn't look odd in any way. Interesting, because if you look at this, I'm sure you can see what I see. This looks like Man-at-Arms armor. And I think with some leaked listings, we do know we're getting a new Eternia Man-at-Arms, so it would not surprise me if this is the piece. Thankfully, when it comes to the shin guards, they are marked right and left, so I'm assuming that means the figure is right. Now, thankfully, these just work on a peg system, so no irritating straps. Thankfully, with the wrist guards here, you just undo the hands, and then you slide them on. This one's marked right, so I assume it's the figure's right. And the hand goes back in. And you can see we have our arm guards. And what may be a preview of Man-at-Arms, once again, we do have these shoulder pads. This one's marked right, which I assume is the figure's right. and they actually go in right here to the strap. So I actually think that's a cool feature. And he has both shoulder pads in. So with the final helmet here, you actually cannot peg this in as a head because it would be horrifying once the mouth opened and you realized it was headless. Instead, you do need Vykron's regular Barbarian head. And then from there, you'll notice that the top of his helmet has the little spike, and that little spike goes into this little hole right here in the helmet. And you can see that once you have it popped in there, you totally can open it up to see Vykron inside, and then you can actually close it right back to where you wouldn't have to see the Barbarian head at all. But I actually do think it's cool that you can kind of see the hair coming out of the bottom, and it makes it less like he's a robot, because that was never the intention with that prototype. He-Man would indeed be a man that would be dressed like a tank to fight military battles. And once you have him all geared up, he looks like he's ready to join late 80s G.I. Joe. And here we have Vykron in his Eagle armor tank mode thing. And of course, this also represents the first fairly major reinvention that we've seen, and definitely the most reinvented of the three modes. When we looked at Vykron, it was pretty well spot on for the kind of prototype that Roger Sweet had customized and kit bashed together. But this definitely represents something quite different. And I think it'll be more obvious once you see the original Classics version, which is pretty true to that original Roger Sweet prototype. With this guy, they decided, and I think very wisely so, that just having a big old World War II tank head probably isn't the most Masters of the Universe thing that you could probably have. It definitely is a little odd, a little more G.I. Joe than it is Masters. And it's kind of strange. It doesn't really jive with the rest of the stuff. And I know what you're thinking. Well, you know, this is the same line that has a cowboy man in it and, you know, a robotic elephant. I understand that it's that's a stretch to say anything doesn't belong in Masters. But truly, the World War II era, like tank gun turret for a head is odd. This, on the other hand, looks like it belongs in Masters of the Universe. You have armor that pretty well looks like something that the Royal Guard would wear, because I do believe it will be reused for Man-at-Arms. You have a head that looks like it would appear on a vehicle or a playset, but it screams Masters, the whole thing. And I actually think this is really cool. I think right now he's giving me vibes of a Colonial Marine from Aliens, because he has like the giant gun that you hold like in a similar way to how like Vasquez was holding her gun in the movie. And so I really think that this is cool looking. I really like that this handle is movable right here. That is awesome. It also retains that Masters feel. And I think what they happened upon that became their calling card for this mode was that if you incorporate like an animal motif, for some reason that disarms some of the, it brings it back into Masters if you put an animal motif like in the technology, because we saw it happen so many times with different vehicles. So I think that this seems kosher to me when it comes to feeling like something that would have been in Masters. Plus you can have all kinds of fun with, you know, these turrets, and if you want to, it actually looks really good without the helmet. Like, it really does just look like Vykron is, you know, an extra armor, because the shoulder pads, and I don't know if this is intentional or not, but the shoulder pads bring together the silver on that helmet. So I actually think that's a massive win. So I actually really like this reinvention compared to the original, because it does bring it in line with more of that Masters feel. But of course, you know what's coming next. We need to do a comparison with the original Classics version. Alright, so here we have a comparison, and this is a very odd comparison for me, because it's so different, and the flavor of the figures are just completely different, that I don't really have a good read on even like looking at them and seeing them as the same thing, because to me they're practically not. I definitely feel that when it comes to being proportional and just a cool looking design on its own, I'm leaning towards the Four Horsemen original right here. And I definitely want to kind of show you more of the design, turning them to the side, but I feel like this is more cohesive right here. even though it probably doesn't suit Masters as well as the new one. I don't know, I like the audacity that they have the stars on it and this ridiculous looking tank head, and I just think that it is a cool looking Masters character, even if it, you know, doesn't necessarily go with what we're used to. I think that this Vykron over here in the tank mode is really cool, and it's probably more kosher to Masters of the Universe. However, I think because the helmet is so big, I think it throws his proportions off quite a bit. And over here, you have more of what I would think like a squat looking, you know, super muscular tank man would be. And over here, it's more, you know, he's a little more wiry looking. The head looks really big, and I feel like more should have been done to bulk this out a little. He's still really cool looking, and I'm probably doing him a disservice by not having him holding his gun, which I think it fixes some of those issues, but you know, you can't get away from it feeling a little unproportional. I think that maybe it improves it a little if I open up the helmet and you can see that it's a guy in there, and that kind of restores your point of reference for his proportions. But I think in the end, yes, I am going to give the point to the Four Horsemen on this one and the original Classics version. Before we do the final transformation into the Spaceman, it is worth noting that the back of the tank armor did have the little slots, so if you wanted to, you could totally put on the jetpack that we're going to be looking at. So just so you know, that is a possibility, even though I don't show it. And while I'm at it, for things I missed, there is weapon storage on the back of the Barbarian's armor for the axe. Alright, so it's time for our transformation into the Spaceman. He does include these little wrist guards here. So we'll go ahead, and they are marked left and right, and they go one way. He does include a space rifle, or blaster, whatever you want to say here. Kind of looks like a, I don't know, a nail gun. And he probably has the simplest transformation of them all, because there isn't anything going on the boots. Instead, you have this one piece, which is the chest armor and the belt. And with that, put this one on and this one on, and it feels a lot easier to connect than the tank armor did. And the head, as you can see, is attached. This isn't just a helmet, this is a complete alternate head, so you don't put Vykron's head under this one. And the last step being the jetpack. And you have the Spaceman ready to roll. Alright, so looking at the Spaceman, definite Rocketeer vibes. Definite, I think the obvious thing is Boba Fett, right? From Star Wars. A helmeted guy with a jetpack. It's kind of sci-fi. I mean, I think at the time, especially, that would have definitely been the Roger Sweet influence. And I think a lot of people just say that if you look at that kit-bashed figure, that it kind of looks like a modified Boba Fett of some sort, but it's, you know, it's hard to say. I'm not an expert on what was used or anything like that. I really do like the kind of overall look of the thing, especially compared to the original that we saw, you know, in those old pictures. I think that this retains more of its own identity and even sort of looks like a Zodak helmet in a way. So I do think it brings it a little closer to Masters in that, by that token. I do think that he does look like a character that could be in like New Adventures of He-Man. So I think that that definitely kosherizes it a little bit. And I think it's also interesting that if you're looking at the jetpack and all of the great sculpting on here, that they went with these kind of translucent glittery wings on the back. So it's like they're energy constructs. You can actually remove these. So he can wear this, but he doesn't always have to be in flight per se. It can just be a jetpack that's lying dormant if you want it to have more of the Boba Fett look and not so much of like this constant jetpack that's always going. Of course, those just tab right back in really easily. The jetpack can be a little aggravating because these are kind of like little hooks and they're kind of hard to get through there all the way. So you really have to pull the armor out from the chest and then let the hooks dig in. Now, looking at the head and the wrist guards and all of that as a complete package, I really do think that it does a great job of making you feel like you have a completely different figure. What is funny though is that they don't do anything to the feet. Nothing. And nothing to the loincloth. They're just kind of there. So he's this space barbarian. It's kind of a funny thing. I don't know. It does work, I think, visually when I'm looking at the figure. It's not horrible or anything, but it is a really funny thing. And just in case you're curious, yes, if you would like to, you can just put Vykron's head on there, and you can see that the helmet kind of hangs down as if, you know, he's just got it off to the side for a minute, or he's taking it off for some reason. So if you want Vykron to fly around like this, you totally can, and it's a cool option. I'm not 100% sure that this cord comes out or anything. It's definitely very poseable, and it can be retracted in and kind of pull out. It probably does pull out, especially if you add a little heat, but it's not really something that I feel like, you know, playing around with too much. And time for a comparison. You can see the Classics version of Space Vykron. And man, oh man, is this a lot to take in terms of a comparison. To me, this is the toughest one because they don't really resemble each other very much. They're two just completely different takes on one visual identity, and neither one of them are real replicas of the original, because I think they're scared to death to get anywhere even close to making something that looks like Boba Fett, and I would be too, because of those Lucasfilm lawyers. I don't know, there's a couple of different ways to look at this. I think one way that you can go is that this is a lot more complete in some ways, especially if you look at the legs down here. That's the unfortunate bit for the Masterverse version. You actually have real shin guards down here. And for some reason or another, that was the mode that they decided just wouldn't have any kind of shin guards with it. The other two have very prominent shin guards, and for this one they just decided it wasn't a thing, and I do think that that's fairly disappointing. So much so that I found myself referencing the artwork and making sure that there wasn't something I was supposed to put on there or that it wasn't included, so that was confusing for me. The other thing I think is that this guy feels a little half-baked because the chest is kind of wide open, and he doesn't seem as complete that way. So there's definitely some room for interpretation here. This one is, in some ways, it's sort of a toss-up. The jetpack and the missile back here, they really help, you know, give the figure a silhouette. And this loincloth piece, which isn't here, also helps give the figure its own identity. So in terms of giving the figure, you know, a really distinct identity and making it feel like a completely different figure, I think, again, that the Horsemen win on this round, because even though these are completely different kind of visual identities for the same character, I feel like, once again, just like with the argument about the tank man, this just seems like more of a complete realized vision, even if I kind of like the visual of what this was going for more. I actually think this is a little neater of a design, whereas this, at least they were able to execute exactly what they wanted to do. And of course, I think it's because, you know, you're looking at more of a value kind of figure with Masterverse over here, because it's $35, and you compare that to the original Vykron, which was, you know, a decade ago, and it had a lot more paint. Even you can see things like the sparkly paint going on and the shading and all of this. There was a lot more paint deco budget, but this has more of the articulation. So it's kind of, I don't know, if either way, I would still give it to this guy right here as just a more complete vision. Alright, and there you have it, the brand new Masterverse Deluxe Mattel Creations exclusive Vykron. Now, I really think that this is a heck of a deal for what you're getting. Of course, you have to pay some shipping and handling, but $35 for the extensive amount of accessories and things that you get with this guy, it really is deluxe, and some of those accessories are even soft goods, so it really does feel premium. Now, of course, your mileage is going to vary, and of course, you know, we're all looking for something a little different out of Masters, but this is very much up to you about how you feel about this. Now, I know for some of you, probably this character doesn't do a thing for you, and that's okay, because it really is as obscure as all get out, making this the perfect kind of release for Mattel Creations. And judging by its sales, it's still available, so chances are this was a little obscure for most folks. However, I do think there's a lot of value here, and there's a lot of great artistic merit. Even if the Spaceman and Tankman modes don't exactly overcome the original Masters Universe Classics versions, the actual Vykron mode is a hearty upgrade from it. So even with Vykron as the primary focus, as you can see, there's lots of cool ways to mix up the parts and kind of still have that awesome head sculpt highlighted, but also utilize all of the other parts to get some really awesome stuff. And with that, that's the mode I'll keep Vykron in to end the review. Guys, I really do hope that you have enjoyed this review today. Of course, be sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video, as it really does help us out. And let me know down below, which figure do you think wins the fight? Do you believe that it's Vykron here for the Masterverse, or do you believe it's Vykron from Masters of the Universe Classics? Even though I do declare the Classics version to be the winner, it still kind of sets uncomfortably with me, because I know what a great value that this guy is and how much of a better main mode that he has. So even though 2 out of 3 went to the Classics version, I still can't help but look at this as an upgrade because of how much better that main Barbarian Vykron mode really is. As always, God bless you and yours, and I'll see you on Fanboys Forever. Fanboy out.